So, how are you today, Frank?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, we are. It's weird doing a tour of this length because we're like just over a weekend and we're nearly done, and that's a really odd feeling. But it's going well. The shows are huge, and everyone is clapping at the end and going home happy. So it's all good.
That's what they should do. So you've just signed my copy of England Keep Your Bones. You've got a track on there, Wessex Boy, talking
Yes.
about the importance of being home and things like that.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be Bournemouth today, the closest to home?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, this is technically the hometown show on this tour,
that's
and
what I'm asking.
yeah, and we're quite a long way away from where I grew up. In fairness, I mean, you know, it is one of my very best friend in the world lives in Poole, and so I saw him this afternoon. He's coming down later, so that's lovely. And like, I've got family coming tonight because they're making the trek over and that kind of thing, and it is nice. I mean. You know, I wrote a song about being from Winchester and then immediately moved to London because that's that's what you do. And it's funny because like my mum's side of the family is more from down here, and I'm more my dad's side is more from London, so I've kind of gone back up to that side of my family. But I mean, it's, you know, I had some nice bits of my childhood that I remember fondly, and there's definitely, when I get down to certain areas of the South Downs, there's a kind of peace that falls on my soul that I don't find anywhere else. Do you know what I mean? It's funny, like the weather today is miserable and sort of not usual for this part of the world, do you know what I mean? So it doesn't feel very south coasty at the moment because it's snowing outside. But it is, yeah, it's lovely to be in this part of the world.
Cool. And if you can you drop us a story from being in Bournemouth at some point before? Or...
Yeah, I mean, I played a lot of early days shows down here, mainly under the auspices of a guy called Adam Boucher, who was a singer-songwriter from Bournemouth. And a lot of the early days shows I did were effectively kind of gig swaps. You know, like he'd say, I can put you on in Bournemouth if I can jump on the show with you in London or whatever. So we would do that kind of thing. Adam now lives in London, so I'm not sure he's coming tonight, or at least hasn't called me. But you know, playing the Portman and like the green.
Yeah,
that is the, yeah, okay. And is that closed now? Is that right?
It's being turned into flats right now.
Being turned into flats like every other fucking thing.
Obviously,
yeah, I mean, one thing I do remember, because I played them a few times, and one of my early memories of it is opening a show with a new song that was called "I Knew Proof Rock Before He Got Famous," and that song was a real kind of like breakthrough song for me in my writing. It was the first time I wrote a song that really felt like I'd written something adult. Do you know what I mean? That's not to disrespect anything I wrote before that, but it just really felt like I'd kind of found my measure as a writer, and I kind of knew that even before I played it to anyone. And I played it that night, and I remember people reacting to it really well and kind of going, "Oh shit, okay." So I always remember that fondly. There was once upon a time a video of me playing that performance on YouTube. It seems to have gone. I was trying to find it the other day, and I couldn't find it.
It's funny, you never know who's watching your stuff on the internet. That guy doesn't realise that you...
Yeah, no, totally. But it was, but yeah, I mean, and then also, I'm not sure if it was the same gig, but like one of the Portman shows, I ended up running down to the beach with everybody and playing like another show on the beach because I was hammered and having a good time. So yeah, good memories from Bournemouth.
Yeah. So we're on the Be More Kind tour.
Yeah.
As you know, Peter's even behind us. You are known for your fantastic lyricism. It's something that's inspired me and many other people. Can you, and please don't slap me, can you clarify why you chose to go Be More Kind instead of Kinder? And actually, in Don't Worry, I think you used the word kinder.
Yeah,
it's not grammatically quite correct, is it?
Yeah, well, I mean, Be More Kind works. And it
does work, yeah.
It's kind of it's sort of a semi-quote. Okay. Clive James, I don't know if you're familiar, he's my favorite, one of my favorite writers. He's terminally ill, which is very sad, but in his illness has been writing some of his best poetry. And he wrote in the poem Leçon de Ténèbres, he writes, I should have been more kind. It is my fate to find that out, but find it out too late. And that, when I read it, just kind of instantly devastated me. You know, he's somebody who I hold in extremely high regard, and if somebody of his kind of emotional and intellectual heft finishes his life with that sentiment, that's good advice for anyone, you know what I mean? So, and it just really, really kind of just stuck in my mind, and I had the beginnings of the song Be More Kind within a couple of days of reading that poem for the first time. So it's sort of a nod towards that.
See, so that's what I thought that was a stylistic choice.
Yeah. But I mean, Be Kinder would work, but it wouldn't scan quite the same way.
So I think I've clarified this is correct. I believe you were starting to write an album, and then there was, difficult and political turmoil and everything, and so you scrapped the songwriting process. Will any of those previous scraps turn into
yeah. Well, actually, I had finished writing an album,
That's what I actually did think, yeah.
I didn't scrap it. I just kind of put it on hold for a second, and I'm starting the album sessions to record those songs on Tuesday.
Fantastic.
So, and that it's kind of a history concept record in a funny way, which I know sounds terrifying, so brace yourself. Essentially, it's a record, it's 13 songs, and each song's about a real historical woman who is not particularly well known, and who, I guess, I would say that, I mean, well, on one level, it's like they're just good stories that are fun to write songs about. I think that there is a kind of implied angle on it that if they were men, they would be more famous. I'm not sure that I necessarily need to stand on a soapbox and say that out loud. I think it's kind of implied in me actually bothering to write songs about them, But it's kind of, and I sort of stumbled into it as a concept. I ended up, at one point, I just had these 3 songs that were all had the same kind of format of inspiration, and it was kind of like, well, 3's a crowd, as they say. So I just kind of followed that road down. But yeah, I mean, it was, I just felt like I had to respond to the world a bit more directly after 2016 happened to all of us. But it was never for any lack of love for these songs. And as I say, I'm recording them from Tuesday.
Fantastic. So, a surprise to you, there's someone in this room that's got a question for you. There's someone that's not in this room.
Right, okay, I was going to say.
So, I hear that you're now an author of your second book, and I was just wondering what the process is like. How do you go about choosing who to dedicate books to? Because I would imagine that's quite a big part of the writing of the book. So, I wondered if you considered how you go about considering
right. This was quite recent, right?
So I was with Bean on the Toast yesterday.
Right.
So I decided to.
Yeah. Cheeky little bugger. Okay, so basically the new book's about songwriting, and I had dinner with Jay the other day and told him when over dinner that I had decided to dedicate my new book to 3 people who were the 3 people who, in my opinion, taught me the most about songwriting, whether they intended to or not, which were Adam Duritz from Counting Crows, John K. Sampson from The Weaker Thans, and Jay. So I dedicated a book to him because, like I say, it was. I've told this story in various places, and I tell it at length in the book. But I was in a very different musical headspace when I was in Million Dead, which was a lot to do with kind of complexity and extremity for its own sake, and I was really obsessed with kind of like stuff like kind of Bear versus Shark, and I guess Dillinger to a degree as well, and that kind of thing. And then I met Jay socially, and then I heard him play these songs that had 3 chords, and they were about us. And they were about things we did last weekend. Yeah. And there was something so revelatory about that to me. It was just like, oh shit, songwriting could be like this. It doesn't have to be this furious... Because it wasn't just musically, intellectually, or lyrically I should say. Like a lot of the Million Dead lyrics now, I have mixed feelings about, because on the one hand, they're very heavily crafted, shall we say, but there is definitely an element to quite a few of them where I was trying to show off how clever I was, or at least how many books I'd read, and in retrospect there's something a little alienating about that to me. And in particular, Jay wrote this one song. We had this one weekend where one of our friends took a whole pile of acid and got convinced that the Chinese army were following him, but they were all really, really, really tiny little plastic soldiers around the room that were the Chinese army out to get him. And it was hilarious. And then literally 5 days later, Jay had a song about that. And it was just like, oh my God, songwriting can be about real life and not about complicated metaphors about Polish communism or whatever. And that was a huge breakthrough for me as a writer. So I dedicated the book to him as well.
Interesting. So how it came about is I saw him yesterday and caught up with him. I'd interviewed him recently. And I said to him, I haven't actually written a question about the book. I'm going to ask a question about the book. Said, or can you think of something right now, or have you got something on your, you want to look at something on my laptop? And he went, I've got it.
Yeah. Cheeky so-so.
So actually this follows on quite well. So there was Near Jerk and Million Dead in the early days, which you kind of talked about there. And then the start of your career was predominantly acoustic, and little extra bits. You've gone and formed Mongol Horde, which has some similarity, stylings to the
and indeed band members.
So, yes.
Yeah.
Will you ever return to a completely acoustic thing for an actual full release? I'm just thinking you've gone full circle with the heavy.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, the next record I'm going to make, the one I'm starting on Tuesday, doesn't have much in the way of drums on it. Yeah. It's going to be, well, it does some tracks, but it's a mainly acoustic release. I mean, it's funny, like, when I think about records that I like, which is the main way I think about music anyway, like, I'm not sure that there's that many studio records that are purely acoustic that I'm that into. Having said that, two of my all-time favourite records are Live at the Old Quarter by Townes Van Zandt and Career Moves by Loudon Wainwright, both of which are solo live acoustic records. So I definitely, and I have mixed feelings about the live album as a format anyway, because I think that a live show and a recording are two separate things, and there's a part of me that doesn't see the point in putting out live records. Just come to a show, you know. But I can see the mileage in perhaps at some point doing like an acoustic record, like a live acoustic record. That might be kind of fun. Yeah. So, but we'll see. I mean, the thing is, you know, the other thing is, it's like it's really, I'm constantly staggered by the sort of implicit conservatism of some music fans who, whenever I do anything, they go, "It is different from the last thing," and I say, "Yes, that surely is the point." I mean, I'm not David Bowie, I know that, but it's like I don't want to repeat myself, you know. Okay. I don't see the point, and like particularly when I'm writing or indeed picking track listing for a record, I don't need to write a song that sounds like photosynthesis again because that one's already in the set. I think about it from a setlist point of view, you know? That if I had another song that was the same, I would have to choose between the two of them every night, and that would be annoying. You know, so I'm always just trying to fill gaps that have not yet been filled.
Cool. So, 4 Simple Words.
Yes.
On recovery, talks about socialising, dancing, drinking, whatever you need to get by. When you know, having friends around and socialising, can you give us some of your go-to get everyone together songs?
Getting everyone together songs. I mean, there is a large section of my friendship group. I mean, I you know, like everybody, I've got various different kind of circles of friends, but like I would, if you put on Weezer's Pinkerton, pretty much everyone will sing all of it at any given point. That's a real ground zero album, both for my taste and for my friends, in a way that is occasionally surprising. I was in America a few years ago with a completely other set of people I've got to know in the last few years, and that's not been a current topic of conversation at any point. And I just started playing some of the songs off Pinkerton, and everyone knew all of them, and it was just like, oh, cool, everyone loves this record. So that, and then if I go back in time a little bit, August and Everything After by Counting Crows is the one that everyone knows that record.
So, obviously you're short for time, but I know this one's important for you.
We'll keep going.
I think this would be important for you. So, one of my questions I ask everyone is give the Frank Turner seal of approval to a few bands that you want to get a bit of credence.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why I knew you'd want
Yeah. Well, I mean, the sort of the shortcut cop-out answer to that is just to look at who I tour with. I always pick my supports. That's really important to me. I mean, obviously, on this particular tour, we have one of the supports we have is Jimmy Eat World, and I'm not sure that they need much recommending to people. Do you know what I mean? I'm extremely honoured and blown away that I'm doing a tour with Jimmy Eat World. Let's get that in there. But like Grace Petrie, who's playing first, is incredible. She's just a phenomenal songwriter. So having her along is really wonderful. But I mean, I also have huge lists on my laptop of bands that I want to tour with in the future. Sean McGowan's pretty high on that list. The Red Clay Strays are a band from Mobile, Alabama, who we did a show with, who blew my tiny little mind into smithereens. And in fact, on that level, Holy Moly and the Crackers, I don't know if you're familiar with them. They are from London. They are just unbelievable. So, like one of the best live bands I've ever seen. So, you know, I have constant lists of this, but the easy way to do it is to look at who I tour with, and indeed the lineup for like Lost Evenings and stuff like that, because again, I pick all of it. So these are the bands I'm excited about right now.
Before we completely wrap up, I kind of wanted to know, Dive Dive was the backing band that became your band.
Yeah.
And you know, how did this come about? How did you eventually go, actually, yeah, these are going to be my guys? I thought we'd give a bit of credit to, you know, the guys that spend every night with you.
Which, yeah, they deserve all the recognition. They basically, when I was in Million Dead, in between Million Dead tours, I used to crew for other bands because I didn't want to go home. And I was crewing for a band called Reuben. I don't know if you remember them. And I was selling shirts for Reuben on tour, and Dive were the support band. And so I saw them play every day, and I thought they were phenomenal. And then not long after that, Million Dead started to fall apart as a band, and I started thinking about what I was going to do next. And I just happened to be having a beer with Ben from Dive and mentioned that I was thinking about trying my hand at this acoustic songwritery type thing. And he said, well, we've sort of built our own studio in our house. And he was like, at that point, he was like, we kind of want to just practice. We want to get our eye in, and also we can play. So if you needed other musicians, we would have that too. So the next thing that happened was it was February 2006. I have no idea why I can remember that. But February 2006, I went down to Tarrant's house in Oxford, and me and Ben, Tarrant and Nige made the Campfire Punk Rock EP together, and Nige played the keys on it because we didn't have a keys player. And then from that point, in terms of a guitarist, a bass player, and a drummer, they were just there. They were already part of it right from the word go. I kind of like the fact that Dive were kind of a punk band, and they brought that kind of angle on it. Although, interestingly, from a very different sort of angle, a different corner of the punk scene. Like I think it's one of our strengths that we all have quite different tastes in music. And like, so for example, those guys are all obsessed with like Gang of Four, XTC, that kind of corner of punk rock. And for me, like, it was more kind of about Social Distortion, Descendants and stuff like that. When we got a tour with Social D in 2010, none of the other guys in the band had ever heard of them. And I was like, are you out of your fucking minds? So that was a kind of a strength. And then, so that was, there were four of us. And then we went through a string of piano and keys players, which didn't work out for various different reasons. And then eventually, Matt was playing keys for Andy York. Andy York used to be an Unbelievable Truth with Nigel, my drummer, and they were opening for us on a tour. And my keys player on that tour quit halfway through. That's a story that I don't want to go into again. And we needed somebody to step up and play the keys. And Matt is such a fantastic piano player that he kind of just stepped into the breach, and there was a real sense when Matt joined the band that we had found our measure. Having said all that, the other thing about us as a collective of musicians, this is a longer answer than you were bargaining for.
Is it a longer answer than you're bargaining for?
No, it's fine. I mean, I'm telling a story.
I'm really happy.
When I was a kid, I was part of the UK hardcore scene, and something I noticed a lot as a kid was that UK hardcore bands would play 50 shows a year maximum because there just wasn't any more shows to play. And then every time an American hardcore band would come through, like really underground bands, like kind of like Walls of Jericho, Boys Sets Fire, all those kind of things, they would wipe the floor with our bands because they were doing 250 shows a year. And I just remember thinking, yeah, man, that's how you become tight as a band, as you play that much. And that was always kind of in the back of my mind. And then when we started touring as a band for a few years, we would tour the UK and then after a while Europe, and I'd always play solo in America because I couldn't afford to take them with me.
Yeah, I realised it was a big change, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was, and like that, the first few American tours we did were so hand to mouth financially. But once we got out there, like particularly the first year we did on tour in America in 2010, boy, did we go through the ringer. But I really feel like it beat us into shape as a band. Like, we nearly killed each other several times because we were just like, we were in a van, we had no crew, and you know, we were just driving 8 hours a day, sleeping on the floor of motels and eating terrible food. And it was punishing in the extreme. But we survived that process kind of by the skin of our teeth. But at the end of it, not only were kind of our personal issues kind of permanently ironed out, but also like if I listen back to recordings of us playing before that tour, I'm just like, man, fuck that, you know. And afterwards it's like we learned how to play and how to put on a show, and we were definitely, like a lot of people, kind of forged in that concept on the American road.